We'd like to welcome you to the virtual kitchen table. We are Haley from Taking a Kinder Path, Ashley from Ashley as Mama and Storytime Shelves, and myself, Erin, from Everlearning. We're gathering to have conversations about family life and home education, most specifically unschooling, which is sometimes known as self-directed education, or as I often refer to it, whole life learning. We'll be sharing experiences and ideas, learning as we go. We hope you'll pull a chair up to the table and join us. Welcome back to the virtual kitchen table. It's Erin here today, and I'm here with Cyrielle from Unschooling and Thriving. Hello, Cyrielle.
Hi, Erin.
It's good to have you back again. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, and Kendel from spark.to.flame.homelearning. Kendel, really nice to have you back again as well.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah, me too. And we are missing both Haley and Ashley today. So Haley has been able to come back to recording. She was gone for a little while, but we've done some more recording. I think by the time this episode comes out, a couple of those episodes will have come out. But schedules did not align today, and Ashley ended up not able to make it either. But I think between the three of us, I think we're, I don't know, there never seems to be a shortage of things to talk about. So I think we'll be just fine. This is sort of a part two. I don't know if we'll formally call it that or not, but it kind of was born out of an initial episode with you, Cyrielle, where we talked about creative practice and the idea of creative practice nurturing our well-being. So I think we'll continue to talk about creative practice today, maybe creativity more broadly. In the initial episode, we talked about our own creative practice quite a lot. We did talk a little bit. We touched about some creativity with our kids as well. But I think today we'll talk about both, but maybe take some time to focus more about our kids as well. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it. And Cyrielle, I don't know if you might just highlight, I know you're offering a few things right now. Your website, Unschooling and Thriving, has a lot of really good resources that you're adding lots of good stuff frequently. And I think the last time we spoke, you had an upcoming, like a mini series or a mini workshop. So yeah, if you just wanted to take however long you'd like, just to talk about that workshop and anything else that you think would be, interesting for people to tap into.
Oh, thank you, Erin. Yes. So when we were talking, I released the mini series, which is like mini course. It's the same, which is a 3-day, very short, bite size, just because I know we are sometimes short on time. So, and it's called Reclaiming Your Time. So because we talked about creativity, is just reclaiming time in our daily life, because it can quickly become, busy, and, above all in the summer month as well, like we tend to do lots of things outside and we might not take time, for us. So reclaiming your time is just 3 days. You receive an email every day with like a short 5 to 8 minutes video that just talks about different things. And it's really helpful just to even zoom out and just realize, where our time goes and how we can, use some of this time to for our creative practice and to nurture our soul. So what I call soul care is just a general idea for like the well-being and the things we do for us to feel good and feel joy in our daily life, basically.
Okay, I love that. And I did notice they were like such a good length. It was enough to get into, but it was just a nice short snippet. So it was great. It was very manageable.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, I didn't want something to be overwhelming, because I know sometimes like these kind of things can be overwhelming, and like the short amount of time is like enough, just a little bit every day, and then you can decide how you can work it out. Like even you can spread it. So yeah, they just have to go to the website and it's on the first page. They can just sign up. And then also in terms of creativity, I also do lives every week. So just because sometimes I think when something is scheduled, it's easier to actually commit to it than just having not even like a habit. Sometimes also it's like it can feel daunting. But if it's just like something that, I want to do that, I want to schedule it, it's going to be my time, and I'll do that maybe that day. So it doesn't become like something that's feels too much, just, like the invitation of trying to be more creative. And so I have three different ones. Mondays are more mindful coloring and things like that. And Wednesdays are watercolor. And then Fridays is more fiber art. So like I don't knit, but like I do crochet, and it could be like cross stitching or anything, something like with repetition. Because we talk about it, I think, in the first episode about the repetitive movement of craft, and that can be like soothing and meditative. So that's also like why I'm doing it too.
Okay. Oh, that's exciting. Thank you. And so we'll put those links in at the end as well. But yeah, I just thought it might be nice to kind of highlight those at the beginning. And I noticed you had the coloring. The times don't work very well for me as far as my schedule in the lives, but I think I can't remember if I mentioned it. I don't think I mentioned it in the episode. I think it might have been in an email to you and Ashley later, that in the first episode I was talking about how I don't really do like crafts or handiwork, but I have such an appreciation for them. Like I'm so interested in them. I'm so respectful, I think, of other people's practices that way. But I was trying to think of that repetitive kind of that it almost puts you into that meditative, mindful state. And coloring, I do love to color. And that I can't remember. I don't think it came up in the conversation. I think it was afterward. So yeah, I was excited to see that you were offering that because there's something to that coloring. And I think for me, it's that there's still enough you're choosing, right? You're choosing colors, you're choosing combinations, you're choosing how the amount of pressure you want to put on the paper as far as, thickness or a more faded look. So to me, it's an easy, relaxing way to be creative, but in a really meditative kind of way. So anyway, yeah, I liked that you added coloring in there. So,
Yeah, I think
yeah.
coloring, I love that you're talking about that, because I think coloring maybe can be discarded because you're not creating something from scratch. It's already there, like the drawing has been done. But I think it's great that people can actually do that because, you don't need different, like you don't need to do from A to Z. Like you don't have to do everything to actually enjoy the benefits. And actually in the book that we talked about before, she talks about like the different types of creative activity, and I can't remember now, but like it's exactly that, like the types, ones that have like really high instructions or something that's very like, and you can enjoy both, like they both have the same benefits, or like ones that don't have any instructions on any patterns and you just come up with it. But like coloring, you have the thing already, but the fact that you're choosing the colors, as you said, like it's just all of this process, yes, has the same benefits.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and it's perfect when we're talking about it in the context of unschooling, because we don't need to focus on that performance outcome aspect as much, right? We're thinking about well-being and authenticity and reflection. So I feel like it fits in to an unschooling conversation in a way that it might not if you were having like a fine arts conversation or, something more achievement oriented. So yeah, I love that. And Kendel, I'm so glad you joined today. It's interesting because when we had our first conversation with Cyrielle, at that time, I'm always thinking of you because I love chatting with you, but I wasn't thinking of you in connection necessarily with the topic because it was a new topic. We weren't sure where the conversation was going to go. And then afterward, I got thinking about how so many of the things we touched on remind me of you and your own creative practice that you share, but also the way you share around your time with your kids. And to me, it always has like an essence of creativity, just your life and the way you share about it and the way that you think. So I'm really, thank you for being part of this today. This is good.
That's so nice. Thanks so much.
Yeah. So I don't know if we want to dive into a few thoughts I think things will kind of weave together, but we can start by diving into a few thoughts around our kids, if that works. And I mean, I think just very generally, I kind of got thinking about like where I noticed creativity or creative practice in my kids. And I want to give you both a chance, so I won't go on too long, but I'll just, I guess, start by saying that I have kids who are creative in very traditional, obvious ways, particularly my daughter, I think, because, we talked about this last time. Art is kind of seen as, art and particularly art with an outcome. So a watercolor painting or a sketch or, a sculpture, something like that is very traditionally thought of as creative. And it's been kind of fun just to expand the way I think about creativity, because really creativity is not just owned by visual art. There's so many different ways we can be creative. And in fact, sometimes some of the most creative people may not have great fine motor skills or may not have a love of color. We need creativity in so many different ways. So I loved thinking of it in that more expansive way. And I got thinking about one of my kids who I think really expresses their creativity through clothes. And I mentioned this last time that it's funny to look at things through a different lens, because my initial lens was like, why so many clothes? Why are you buying so many clothes? There isn't room for all these clothes. And really starting to understand that some of that was self-expression and trying different colors together and trying different kind of looks together that maybe form certain identities. Messaging, different messaging you can wear as far as t-shirts, things like that. But there really is an element to creativity and self-expression in the way that people dress. And I was also thinking about it in terms of people that go into like the beauty industry as far as hairdressing or cosmetics. That is a form of creativity, absolutely. And it's just a different medium. I don't have anybody that's going into that, but just through talking to other parents, now that my kids are older, talking to parents about what their kids are going into and being able to see that thread of knowing that child when they were young and maybe really enjoying art and hearing that now they're doing something, let's say in the cosmetic industry, and going, oh yeah, that absolutely makes sense. Not every kid who spends time drawing is going to become a visual artist. So so I have lots of specifics, but for now, I just kind of wanted to say it's been fun to look at that more broadly. Yeah, Kendel, I don't know if you want to start.
Yeah, I love how you categorize the traditional things that we think of as creativity and then the more expansive way of thinking about it, because I've definitely grown in that over the years in recognizing more things as creative outlets. So some of the things, for example, that my daughter's into that would be more traditional. She loves watercolor painting and whittling and playing violin, both like taking lessons, but also like creating her own songs as well. And then she enjoys baking. And I know you mentioned that in the last creativity podcast episode about how baking can be a form of creativity as well. And then my son more traditionally likes to work with clay. And he then creates stop motions with his clay creations and sometimes with his toys. And then something a little more less obvious is that he collects vintage toys. And I really see him being creative with those all the time in the way he displays them in his room and creates these stop motions with them as well. He also really loves a game called Bloxels, which he's creating digital video games through. So it's quite art-based in that you're creating unique characters and backgrounds and things, but then it's also technical in how they all come together, or the storyline that you create as you're creating a game on that app. Pretty awesome to watch those come together. So some more traditional things they're into, and then some more that are these things that you can see as creative expressions, and especially with the the outcome that they give. We were going to be talking about what do you see as those contributing to well-being, and I definitely see so many things coming from those that help me see a lot of what they do as creative that could often just be disregarded. Like I love your example of clothing and self-identity and expression and trial and error of colors, and like that's such a great example of how we can expand our definition of creativity to so many areas of our lives.
Yeah, I knew I've enjoyed seeing the pictures of the vintage toy collection, because I think that's it's a very interesting interest. It's just very cool. I didn't know about the stop motion. And those require, like, they're time consuming to make. Yeah. Make it.
And that's what I was going to talk about a little later on, about what do we see coming from creativity. You mentioned they're so time consuming, right? So like the patience and focus required for those, because they're so immersed in it and so excited about it and have autonomy over it, then you're seeing like these hours, like you're saying, dedicated to a creative practice because it's something totally them and they're in their zone. So pretty cool.
Yeah, absolutely. Cyrielle, does anything come to mind for you with your daughter?
Yeah, so my daughter, she likes art, but like she'll I think you said about like without pushing them, and so she likes art, but sometimes she will go days without doing anything, and so I'll try and entice her to do maybe like something, because I know she enjoys it, but she might not choose it specifically. She might choose other things, and so if I do it too much, then she will just kind of back. But if I kind of strew it, so like I did that with dot painting recently. I just saw that online. I was like, oh, I'm going to try. And I just suggested, oh, I saw that cool thing. Do you want to try it out? And she was into it, and she really, like, she was super creative about it. And then she did another one afterwards. So I was doing mine, and then she just did it with me. And then she did her own afterwards. So like, that's the main thing for me, because I like painting. So that's the things that generally encourage, because that's what I like to do. But she did some clay also, like air dry clay. She really enjoyed doing that. Because I think air dry clay is so much faster than just regular clay, right? So they can have the result, and there's no need to cook or anything. So that's something that she enjoyed doing as well. And in terms of less conventional creativity, I think Minecraft has been a big one for her. Just building things and just using the creativity and just on how to work out things she could create in the game, or like, I can't find the word now, but like things to make something work, and like, or like even the mine carts and like making like paths and stuff. So I just find it fascinating how she just uses her creativity to create things, and even come up with things that I wouldn't even have thought about. Like in problem solving, I find like their creativity comes up, like when she plays with her dad, like Zelda as well, and there's like quests and stuff, and she'll come up with things super creative that my husband hasn't thought about, but she has, like, because so that's the creativity, I think, in the less conventional way that I see her, like in video games mainly, that it's really cool to see. And anything actually, like when she plays with things, or like she animates anything, she'll animate any kind of object that you wouldn't think you'd play with, but like she'll get, like, I got some pipe cleaners yesterday at the thrift store, and she just went and made lots of things, not necessarily craft. At first she crafted things, and then she just made them and just made stories with them, like it's just that creativity that just explodes and just goes beyond what it's supposed to be used with. So I just love watching her doing that.
Yeah, and you'd mentioned problem solving and creativity, and that's like, it's huge. That's a huge part of creativity, is problem solving, whether it's a kind of bigger picture thing, or whether it's just troubleshooting something within, like, creativity within the creative practice, right? Like just needing to be creative about something. And when you're saying that, it makes me think about how kids, adults might have a thought of, you play with this toy, then you clean it up and you put it away. And then we get these art supplies out, and we clean them up and we put them away. And we go on to the next thing, right? As though there's like this activity's finished now, and now it's time for this one. And how when we are more open-ended about how things are used, and just even the timing of it, how often kids will yeah, they'll incorporate things, or, the blocks they're playing with become something to do with the little animals they have over here, or, they are drawing something or cutting something out, and it's related then to something that they're building, like in another part of the room. And I think I wouldn't say that was hugely difficult for me. I'm not like a super, super tidy person, but I think it's definitely something that I remember processing it. And I had spent a lot of time with kids. I did a lot of babysitting, and then I worked with kids. So it wasn't totally foreign to me. But I think when you're working with somebody else's kid or you're babysitting, like, you leave, you go home. And so the idea of having some of these things like set out over a period of time that a game might need to continue into the next day, it took me some time to just process that, like, and strategies, like, where can we move this, or how can we keep this safe from a toddler sibling or something like that, so that you can come back to it tomorrow. But yes, there were so many, you're talking, Cyrielle, about kind of like that personification of things. And like a couple of my kids with like motorbikes and monster trucks. And, to me, I would see those and I would think of them using them like mechanically or zooming them back and forth. But yeah, they would become their own characters, and there would be like a whole storyline happening. And just just coming to a place of respecting that if I was walking across the floor and knocked a couple of things off a racetrack, it was, it's not the biggest deal in the world, but respecting that was part of their story, that these cars were characters, and they had like a part to play. But yeah, I don't know, just a bit of an offshoot, have either of you found like practical ideas for either your own creativity or your spouses or your kids, as far as just like physical management of things, like storage? And yeah.
Well, what you're saying really brings to mind what the phase I'm kind of in right now. And last year, my kids and my husband would have the entire basement set up as a world. So to get through that room to the laundry room was tiptoeing across everything, because it was all very important. And it would go on for maybe 2 months, the same world play that they would keep coming back to. And I saw such value in it that it was quite easy for me with that setup to do the tiptoeing and to be careful of it, because it was so creative and it was so good for their relationship and their bonding. And but when the toys come up to the main floor, and the stop motion setups particularly, don't bump it or it wrecks my next shot, like I got to go back to that after lunch. So definitely, like, I'm living amongst things. And when there's a big setup in my son's room, he'd prefer no one to come in. So then it's the quick hug at the door at bedtime, because knocking something over is very, like you're saying, like respecting that it's very important to them. So I'm definitely in the midst of that phase right now. And I always remind myself the seasons of life and how one day everything can be neat and pristine, and now's not the time, and to put the value on their setups and their creativity above a clean, perfect home, for sure.
Yeah. Well, I love that he's made that clear, right? Like, if he's building that he would prefer, the hug happens outside the room. I think about like knocking a couple pieces out of something as taking that as seriously as if you were an artist who'd been working on a sketch, or like for me, I like to write. So if I'd been like trying to find the wording of a paragraph and like somebody erased it like on their way by, and like I can remember kind of what I wrote, but I don't know if I can get those words quite the same way. So I think it's so much about respecting how important these things are to them. And I would expand that just to put this in here too, around gaming, like, video gaming and computer gaming, because also people don't realize how hard people work to get to certain levels. And so it might just be respecting that they need a few more minutes to come when we ask or whatever. It's, I think we can easily say, well, just turn that off, come away, but we don't know what they're building. We don't know what they're creating in that moment. So really understand. I think back to an episode that I did, I think it was just with Haley and Ashley, and it was about the flow, like getting into a state of flow and learning. And coming to think about it through that perspective helped me not expect my kids to just tear away from whatever they were doing. Because I think flow can be like, let's say that particular hour or that particular afternoon, but there's like a parallel flow, I think, that you come in and out of, but it's like you're deep diving into something for a few weeks, or maybe it's just over a couple of days. And those are those projects where, we might get really into something, or our kids might really get into something. And then, they do eat, they do go to bed, maybe we have somewhere else to go, but there's still an element of that they get back into it the next day. That's kind of like, I think we talk about it often conventionally, like it's a stage they're in, or it's a, interest they have at the moment. But I feel like it could also be seen as this state of flow that just sort of, I don't know, kind of floats along the surface, if that makes sense. And it can continue from day to day. You'll see it even sometimes with a small group of kids with like pretend play. If they're creating a world and then they see each other again the next day and they can get back into their characters again. Yeah. So, Cyrielle, do you have any thoughts around that?
I have a few thoughts. So first, we're currently living in an RV, so for us, space is very limited. So we can't really have things, laying around, and we have 3 cats. So all in all, that's a lot of kind of constraints that we have. But my daughter is 8.5 now, so it's easier for her to accept that she has to kind of tidy something away. Like it's tricky in a small space, but we do give her the time that she needs to kind of come off her play. And what you said made me think, I can't remember who, I think it might be Neurowild. I can't remember the account of the person. There was that drawing of kids who are neurodivergent specifically, having like lots of things coming out of their head, and then the time it takes them to actually bring everything back and be able to move on to something else. So like, and I feel like that's the time sometimes I see her, I say to her like, oh, we're going to have to tidy up because we have to go somewhere or do something. And she'll just take, and it's not repeating is not helping. Like, again, see, she's just finishing her story or whatever she was doing. But like, it's exactly these things like going back in the head, like just finishing the story, putting everything back. And then when she's done, like she's ready to move on. But like just giving that time, once you've said it once, they've heard it, but they need that time to process the end of the story or the end of whatever they're doing,
Yeah. I hadn't thought about that. And is that an image that you commonly?
It's an image that I saw. I have to think. I think it's Neurowild. I think that's the name of her account. She draws and like makes illustrations around neurodivergence, and I had seen it and I was like, yeah, I could see that in my daughter, like just needing that time to process the end of whatever it is that she's doing. Like she needs that extra time to, okay, I can't move on. Like she can't go from, some children can, like, and some people just can just stop and then move on to the next thing, but she definitely can't. And so like I could see it when I saw that. I was like, oh yeah, that's her. Like the transition, it's just a longer transition because she has to put everything back, and I loved the image, and I'll have to try and find it again and share it with you, because it was just, yeah, it was very visual, and I could see that in her totally.
Yeah, I would love that. And I think about how like a lot of it is really like respecting them as individuals and respecting what their individual process is. I'm even thinking about times where we've been out with other families, and there's that moment where like the parents are kind of hurting the kids, like it's time to go, and the kids don't want to finish playing, and you're trying to sort of respectfully wrap up whatever group play they're doing. And then the other thing that can happen, I've seen this happen so many times, then the kids are ready to go. But, maybe I'm having a conversation, like when I'm talking about this winding down, maybe maybe there's 4 or 5 of us and we've been in this like exchange of ideas, and it's quite a creative conversation, and we're like, oh yeah, feeding off each other. And then suddenly or the other thing is suddenly a kid wants to go. And you're like, well, I'm just in the middle of this. It can take moms a long time to wind down their conversation. So I've definitely seen it the other way, where the kids are waiting in the car and yeah, we're wrapping up, because I think that's, as you said, Cyrielle, it might not be the same for everybody. Like everybody's process is different, but I think there's definitely an element of that, of needing to find some sort of closure point in order to transition to the next thing, right? But
yeah, and I think it's generally not taken into account. Like I see it all the time, like children, let's go, like not even like. And I remember like with our daughter, like they were saying, oh, just give like warning. She's always had like an issue with transition, and we've always been the last ones leaving the park, the last ones leaving play dates, like always. And we just accepted that's how it was, no matter how. She just needed everyone to be gone, and then then we could go. That was kind of a closure, like everybody's gone, and now I can go, and there's no one else to play with now. I can move on. But yeah, it's just, I think most people generally just want their kids to move on quickly to things. And sometimes you have like appointments and stuff where you have to be there at a certain time. But I think generally, even if there's no appointment, there's just that rush always to move on to the next thing without taking the time for them to process the closure, as you said, like that transition closure.
Yeah, I'm thinking of a particular era of like our homeschooling lives where we didn't have the kids, they were old enough to kind of be out and about for long periods of time, but they didn't have as much of their own sort of things in the evening. So it felt like we had this really big, like, expanse of time. And there was one other family in particular, like when you talk about being the last ones to go, I just remember people coming for a short pocket of time and leaving. And I was like, oh man, we're just getting like, and that works for some people and it has to work for some people, right? But there was one other family in particular, but there was kind of a couple of others. And our kids would just get into this like really creative, imaginative play. And it was almost like the most fun was had when there were just 2 or 3 families left. And yeah, we had so many adventures that way, not rushing home. But yeah, Kendel, you're nodding. Are you relating to some of this?
Yeah, definitely. I'm thinking about the same element of how my kids would shift into a whole different demeanor and energy level when a large group went down to a small kind of core group. And I've definitely found that. So we kind of shifted into focusing on our time with friends as being this more core group, because we see the kids meshing so well together and really getting into creative flow and just having no expectations for the day so that they can tap into that creativity. It's like that quote with boredom is kind of the impetus for creativity. I'm misquoting it, but so over with this particular group of kids, they just decided over last spring and summer to film a movie together. And so all the kids were like, it was so cute. They were literally sitting around a table as if it was a board table, like a boardroom. And they were coming up with the script and the characters. And then the next time they all brought their costumes. And it was totally hands off from the parents and totally like, if there's a movie that results at the end, there is. If not, oh, well, they had fun in the process. And that same group of kids, they'll often create games together that are kind of like fusions of multiple traditional games into something new. And so it's just really cool to watch it all unfold and to watch them, like you're saying, like join back into the play, even if it's been a week in between or 2 weeks in between, they can get right back into it together and pick up where they left off. So definitely awesome to watch.
Yeah. Oh, that's it's fun just thinking about it. Just picturing all that right now. And then as far as like how, I mean, I probably some of this is just integrated into what we've said already, but as far as creativity and creative practice, kind of sort of looking for factoring into our kids' well-being, are there particular examples that come up for either of you around that? Like, are there times that you can see that a particular something in particular that your child's doing is really feeding into their well-being? And I think I would just start by saying that probably if a child is engaging repeatedly in a particular activity that or creating something, that in and of itself is enough of a sign, right? Our kids know each other, or know themselves really well. So if we see our kids, it might even just be two little wooden or plastic characters or something that they're zoning. I had one child in particular who would just like take an object or two, and I don't know what was happening, but there was some kind of world or conversation happening between the two of them, the two characters. And it was like, that just inherently seemed to be, it would often happen after we'd been out for a period of time. It was like their way of, I think, coming inward and creating their own little dialogue, which I think was really like an unwinding process for them. But yeah, I would be interested if anything comes up for either of you around that thought.
My daughter's actually quite like communicative with, when she's doing something creative, she'll come in and have a conversation about it. So she's definitely come in from whittling and just talked about how calm she feels. And I just love to hear that. So definitely calming and relaxing. Cyrielle, you mentioned in the last podcast with knitting or some repetitive type motion things, you can really, it's meditative and it relaxes the mind. And so I think that's one element of that. And she does the same thing with watercolor. Now that the weather's nicer in our area, she'll take her little portable easel type thing out and just sit outside amongst nature while she's watercoloring. And she has expressed too, she couldn't quite put words to it, but when she creates her own music on her violin or plays some of the kind of more Celtic reels, she feels like it's like expressing her emotions, her feelings, like she's getting who she is. Like it was hard for her to pinpoint what it was, but she was saying that it just, if in my words, I suppose it would express her emotions and her feelings through song. So that was pretty cool to hear about. And then for my son, he's less like communicative about what all these creative practices would be doing for him, but I see definitely enjoyment. Like you're saying, if they're doing something over and over again, they obviously are enjoying it. And so just like literal laughter while he's doing these things that he loves. And focus as well. I forgot to mention earlier, he also loves sketching and like coloring the sketches then. And he often likes to sketch whatever he's into in the moment, which right now is the vintage Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle toys. So he'll create amazing sketches and have the characters doing different scenarios that aren't maybe in the shows or whatever. It's kind of like fan art, right? Picturing the characters doing something else. And so he'll have immense focus and patience, like I mentioned before, with things like the stop motion. And when creating characters with clay, he'll sometimes come back to that 3 or 4 days in a row to get a full character created. So, and then I also have noticed like confidence being built through these creative practices, because they will then share them with others. Sometimes we'll watch his stop motions on the big TV together, or in the case of my daughter's violin, she'll have a recital, or we often bring her violin to families' homes to play together. So like the confidence boost that they get from being able to present something they're proud of. And I also think that I've seen it kind of create a sense of identity for them, where, especially as homeschoolers, when people ask, oh, like, what are you into? Or what are your favorite subjects in school? Some of those types of questions, they can go to their creative practices that they're really proud of, that they have a lot of autonomy over and choice, and just share about those. So it gives them something to talk about instead of feeling like a lack of, well, I don't know what grade I'm in. I don't know what subject I like best. Oh, but I love doing stop motions. I love watercolor painting. I love playing violin. I love sketching and drawing characters I'm into. So it really just builds that framework in for them to be confident about who they are, through things they love, as opposed to things that they just kind of have to choose from, type thing.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's so true. That idea of I don't know, just having something to kind of identify with, or I mean, we've talked about this before, even just those conversations and questions that come up, just having something concrete, right, to be able to mention or yeah, just kind of comment on about yourself. But that, I love that, Kendel, that thought of like creating your own music and just like kind of feeling yourself, right? Just really expressing yourself doesn't necessarily have to be something you can explain really easily. But yeah. Cyrielle, anything for you?
Sorry. I love what you share, Kendall. It's amazing that they're able to express and communicate with you how it makes them feel. So I just love that. I'm assuming they're a bit older, right, your children, but it's still, it's just amazing that they're actually able to know what affects them. I feel like it's such a gift. I don't think we had maybe that when we were being at school and being told all the things, that we have to do, like just having that autonomy over what they can do. And actually, when you sent like what we were talking about and the well-being, and because I'm still in that book of the craft psychology, she talks about something, and I think I shared something about that on Instagram, the self-determination theory and the 3 needs that we have for mental well-being. And it's exactly that, like the competence, the relatedness with people, so sharing what we've done with other people, and then the autonomy, so like doing it ourselves, mastering a new skill, whatever that is, and then sharing it with people. These 3 elements just, are, a big part of a mental well-being. And so my daughter will not express herself, like, communicate how she feels, but I can see when she finishes something that how, proud she is, and that she was able to create that thing, and just that competence, that mastering of that skill of whatever she's creating, or in Minecraft when she's achieved something that she couldn't do before, like just that the level that improves, right? No matter how long you do something, then you get better. And she'll say, oh, I can't do that right now. But I said, well, look, like, we the more time you spend on something, the better you'll get at it, right? Like it's normal. So like I said, like I paint a lot, so I got better, and after a few years painting. And she's the same. Like when she started Minecraft, she had no idea about anything, and now she's got such a level of knowing how and that makes I can see that it fills her her cup, like it brings her joy just to be able to do these things that she couldn't do before, and just immersing herself in all that world, and just listening to things and getting ideas from what she listens to. And yeah, so I can see that it's making her very happy. So like her overall mental well-being, just yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and I wonder too if that kind of brings us to the idea of like encouraging our kids. And like I love, Cyrielle, that you brought the self-determination theory into things, and how so encouraging our kids without pushing them. I think you alluded to it a bit earlier, actually, around Strewing, knowing that there's something that she really enjoys and will probably feel really good doing, but finding that line where you're not pushing it. Because I think that's something that a lot of parents struggle with. And I mean, I think there's a lot of our own work to do there sometimes to understand, like, what's our motivation? Are we thinking, oh, they showed an interest in guitar, so they chose it, but they need to be practicing or whatever. Or, they've gotten really talented using these pastels, and I haven't seen these pastels come out for a while. Like, we can lean in on an interest, but then unintentionally fixate on that kind of as identity. So there's that piece. But I think what we're talking more about here is not so much mastery of something, but like, how does it feed into their well-being? And I think a lot of, and I believe this to a large degree myself. I think a lot of people will say, well, kids know themselves well, and they will come in and out of things as needed, right? As they know that their systems need. But are there times that we do see that, maybe they're uninspired or they're in a bit of a rut, and, do we have a role to play in that? So.
Yeah, something came up for me when thinking about the fine line between pushing and encouraging, because over the past couple of months, I've offered that my daughter could, we could look up whittling tutorials or local woodworking groups or watercolor painting tutorials or programs that you can do online. And, I was just suggesting to her, we can always learn, people who have been doing it for years and years would have tips and tricks for what we could do, especially when it's not whittling's not something I've ever done. So when you feel the lack of being able to support them with your own tips and suggestions, you go right to thinking, oh, let's find someone who can pass that skill on to you. But interestingly, she would continue to decline any of my offers to look into these things. And for a very specific reason, she would say that she didn't want her creative process to be changed or influenced by other people's ideas. And I totally feel like that's valid, because I feel like over history, all of these new waves of art that have come along, for example, were because somebody decided to stop listening to the masters of how things should be done, right? And did something on their own. And so I think that's totally valid, that she'd rather learn from the trial and error, from her own mistakes or from her own process, and really have her outcomes be true to her expression and not, and there's definitely a place for step-by-step tutorials, and there's people that just like different things. So it's not to say that all learning and classes and tutorials are bad. It's just that I really loved her reasoning. And I think it did relate to what Cyrielle brought up in the last podcast, which was the self-determination theory. She wants the autonomy over it completely. And then when we can allow space and time for these creative practices, our kids have the time to get to that level of competence. I often wonder if my kids were at school doing all of the, sometimes they can spend a whole afternoon doing one thing. They spend hours and hours and hours on the things they enjoy. You're not going to have the level of competence in those areas of interest and creativity if you have only 1 hour a day outside of homework before bed. So it's just amazing that you were talking about how those things are for mental, those three, the competence, relatedness, and autonomy, are for mental well-being. I feel like we need this expansive time to be able to get the kids to have a level of competence, to have time for that relatedness in sharing it or in joining in the creative process with others, and the autonomy over, and I liked what you said, Erin, kids can come and go from things and we don't need to attach them to their self-identity. But you're a violinist, but you're a watercolor painter. We can let them come and go just as we as adults come and go in phases with things. But all of those three things working together, helping them have that sense, that mental well-being, I think it does require all this time set aside to allow that to happen. And the choice to dabble in and out, the choice when to do it, because it's a lot different feeling. If we had on our schedule, even if we loved watercolor painting or if we loved gardening, if it was a mandatory thing from noon till 3 that we had to do, it doesn't feel the same. So it's so amazing that they can flow in and out of it and really have autonomy over it and make it their own. And I just loved that she had said, I don't want to create what others are telling me to create. I want it to be a self-expression or unique to me, and I'll just learn. If I make a mistake, I make a mistake.
Yeah. And, when you're talking about the different styles of art and the limits of what you might be able to learn in pockets of time in an afternoon in school, I was just thinking about your son with the Ninja Turtles, and that you were talking about him doing drawings and then maybe coming back to it the next day to finish it or I'm saying perfect it, meaning, what feels good for him. And I think about how many, there's sort of these stereotypes, and you see it in movies and books where kids are doodling in class. So there's the project of like the great artist that everybody's maybe supposed to be emulating or whatever. And then a child is doing their own cartoons or whatever, doodling behind their desk, and they get in trouble for that. I've just heard that reference so many times of, being spoken to because they're doing their own creative stuff. And just to have that wall taken away to begin with, to never even think about whether what you're creating or drawing is acceptable or not, that it's just yours. And it's not secondary to, some great artist somewhere or whatever, but just to really have that time to work away on what you're doing. And when I think about that with your daughter, it's like there's no, like where she ends up will be where she ends up. It's her own outcome. So as you said, maybe there will be a time where she would be interested in the tutorial, but perhaps not. So just having that openness is, I think we get so used to it that we forget what a gift it is, actually, that our kids can just pursue things in that way. Yeah. I wanted to say too something about, this is just kind of like a practical piece, but about the idea of what we offer, like material wise. So even thinking about like, well, just to go to the classic idea of arts and crafts kind of as creativity, and offering our kids good materials, right? Like just, and that's going to differ depending on the child and what they're wanting to create. But I wonder sometimes too, if people get stuck with kind of the standard box of crayons and standard paints, but really allowing our kids opportunities to have more sort of grown-up materials. Or Cyrielle, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that. I know you do your own watercolor painting. Is your daughter interested in that at all? Or do you think about that as far as what materials you guys choose?
I think, I thought about it for myself too. Like, I think for kids and for adults, I think the materials you use and the quality can affect your experience differently. So I'm just thinking, if we were to try something new, even as adults, if we take really low quality material, we might just feel stuck. And like she talks about in her craft psychology, if you start something new and if you have too many obstacles and if it feels too hard, then you're more likely to give up and just to say it's not for me. And you don't have the enjoyment and benefit from doing that craft or whatever activity you're doing. So my daughter had I had different things of what I call different palettes, and I got her one that was like an adult one, and she really enjoyed playing with it. And it's different colors, it's different qualities, more vibrant. It's definitely, I do notice a difference, and she enjoys it. And I recently got natural acrylic, so plastic-free acrylic, which is something that I've never tried, but it's something I'm interested into. And it's really like, it's so different and it's such a good quality, and so she really enjoyed using that as well, like really nice paint. Yes, I do believe it affects how our children see things, because like for us, like if it stops you from the enjoyment, if it stops the enjoyment, then it's just then they're more likely to give up, and we are more likely to give up too. So, and you lose that benefit.
Yeah.
For me, a big thing was, oh, you like whittling? Okay, we're bringing knives into the home. That felt big and a safety issue. So looking into the safety of finger guards or whatever it may be until she's feeling more confident with the knife. So yeah, like trust is a part of it as well. For instance, I mentioned the Bloxels app. That's an app that you have to pay monthly. But I was seeing such creativity and such interest. And so like paying, putting your resources into making a creative environment, or just having I noticed a big shift in my kids' coloring and drawing and sketching when I got erasable pencil crayons, colored pencil crayons, because even if they weren't often, quote, making mistakes, the fact that something's permanent would maybe, like you're saying, that barrier to entry, if they had a issue with, well, this is permanent, so once I got those, I got erasable markers, which are awesome, and erasable pencil crayons, and I just saw them go more freely with it without the worry that they might make a choice they weren't happy with. So even things like that can cause such a shift. I try to create like for my daughter's birthday, I got her a bunch of whittling supplies, and I thrifted a wooden box, for example, that can go in her room that has drawers and a cubby for all the wood, like really leaning into the interest and creating a zone where everything can be easily accessible. It's not buried in our crazy craft closet. And the same with her watercolor, like very similar to you, Cyrielle, when I got a set of nice watercolors for her and brushes, it changed the game, and she's got her little kit that can go around anywhere. So just seeing how they like to enjoy the thing that they're doing as well. Like my daughter would prefer to do it outside when she can. So having that station that can move around the house is so interesting. And then at the very end of our family eating table, we have 2 spots that projects can just be left, and they're always on the go. And I think that's been important for us too, because they have a designated spot and we can still continue to eat and we don't have to clean it all up. So because often they're 2, 3, 4 day long projects that if they have to keep putting stuff back, it might kill the creative process, I think. So just making the home environment like enriched with supplies that they can use that are good quality, like you're saying, Cyrielle, but then also having the mentality of, we don't have to have a show home. We can have projects on the go on the coffee table. We often have whittling flecks of wood all over the kitchen table. So it's the season we're in, and embrace it, because if we're being stringent about, the bell rang, now it's cleanup time, like can happen with some creative things that maybe they offer at schools, that really cuts the creative process. And so kids can think over time, when that's happening, they can say, I'm not even going to begin, because it's so frustrating when I have to stop at a very specific time or clean everything up every time. It makes you not want to go back to it. So I'm sure, like you were saying, I think, Cyrielle, that you crochet.
Yeah.
So like a lot of people that crochet have a basket at the ready so that it can be easily accessible, right? That's what I see often. And so it's that idea of, it's not buried 5 storage bins deep somewhere, so that you're often being like, oh, well, with the half an hour I have, I don't really feel like I can get creative, because it's too put away. It's too hard to get it all out, to like the accessibility.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I notice actually that sometimes I'll do crochet more because it's easy. I mean, obviously we're in an RV, so I do have my desk, so I could have like the paint and stuff, and I do sometimes have it, but it's still more of a longer process than just picking up my crochet thing and go for it. Like, so that accessibility thing is really true. And I think for my daughter, because we're in an RV, I can't leave the things up, but I do believe like when she sees it, she's more likely to do it. So like that string thing. And like yesterday, I got at the thrift store this sticker. It's, paint by number, but it's sticker by number. So it's the same. And on cats, and cats is our special interest. So I got that, and she wanted to do it last night, but it was time for bed. So I said to her, like, I'll leave it on the table. When you wake up, you can do that straight away. And she woke up, got, and did it straight away. Normally she'll go on her switch, but that's because she had that, and I told her and it was there, and then she just did it. And it's easy to pack up because it's not paint. And so I really like that. I thought it was perfect for us to have that on the go. And I mean, it's cat stickers, like so many things going on in there that was perfect. But yeah, I think accessibility is a big factor in and having it, accessible and visual, like you can see it in your space. And that's why I wanted to have my desk too. I think having your space where you have your things is so important to be able to actually do the things.
Yeah, 3 things that I want to try to remember to say on that note about the crochet basket and having your space. There was something it would have been a few years ago on the Living Joyfully network, where I think the conversation started about kids, and the saying was like, paints out? You know, do you have your paints out? And it was this idea of like, if I'm gathering this properly again, I think it was the idea of like whether kids are inspired to do things or not. And that, you know, yeah, if materials are at the ready and they're available and they're visible, or at least easily accessible. They don't have to be out all the time, but just, you know, like the crochet stuff might be in a basket, but as you said, Cyrielle, you can scoop it up. That's so much part of inspiration, is having those visual things. I've seen that talked about too in the idea of bookshelves having front-facing front covers rather than everything kind of put where you're only seeing the spine, actually front-facing books, which you see in libraries, a combination of both, because obviously they only have so much space, but they do front face to feature. And I see that as a way of inspiring people to kind of, oh, you know, look, it's right here. So I think we can do that with our things at home too. And then thinking about the idea, Cyrielle, you know, you were mentioning of if you're traveling and you have a small space, you know, you're kind of living on the road or whatever, which we don't do, but we do have a relatively small house and we had a relatively large number of people in it for the size of it. So we did have to think that through as well, about like how much stuff stayed out and where, and kind of how could we go about that. But I think of that too as its own form of creativity, because we would have to come up with creative solutions that took everybody into consideration. Well, they took people into consideration, and they took the particular nature of something into consideration, whether it was something that needed to dry or, you know, whatever. So it's almost like its own form of creativity to get creative about like, how do we preserve this, or how do we make this work for what you're into, what I'm into, the cat walking by, like all the things can impact something that you're working on. So I found that a way to just kind of getting curious and creative about working through that solution together, as a way to not fall into like, oh, we have no space, or there's too many people, or the cat keeps knocking things down, whatever, just thinking of it as its own form of creativity. So I imagine that could be the case if you're traveling as well. Just there's pros and cons to any way that we live. There's pros and cons to it, right? And then Kendel, I'm trying to think what it was. Oh, it was the erasable pencil crayons, which I don't think we've ever had, and I've never actually thought about. But it makes me think about one of my guys with photography, and a conversation that I was having with him about how before digital cameras, I'm like aging myself here, you would have to be so careful with how many shots you took. And I mean, I'm not even talking like as a photographer, just a layperson taking pictures of your family or whatever. There was such a sense of scarcity, right? Because you only had so many pictures you could take, and you had to pay for all those pictures, and, you know, whatever. And the opportunity with digital cameras, and just like, yeah, you can just be inspired and take pictures and pictures and pictures, and decide afterward what, if any, you want to keep. But it made me think about how much less stifling that is, to just be able to go out with a camera, for any of us with our phones now, and just capture stuff as we're inspired. It's like a whole different world, you know, that particular technology shift.
Yes, I definitely agree. I'm an OG photographer as well, so definitely loved the switch to digital for that reason. And what that brought to mind for me is I don't find that I like to do a lot of drawing, but since we got a tablet and we have Procreate, because of the undo feature or the different layers feature, I find that it's so relaxing to draw on there, because it just makes it like, that's part of the process now, is deleting a whole layer, is pressing undo a bunch of times, because it's just so different. And so I feel like it's maybe going to allow people who think they don't like drawing or that type of art, if they get access to digital art, it's a whole different thing, because that probably ties a little bit into, I wouldn't consider myself a perfectionist, but that's one of those types of things where it's not enjoyable if you feel like you're constantly doing things that can't be undone. And so I actually enjoy, it's not that I need it to be perfect or I have any specific use for it, but I find it relaxing when I do digital art, because I can easily change my mind, delete a whole layer. So it opens up a whole world to me that I find much more relaxing than I do watercolor, and I have done oil in the past, but it feels so much more permanent because I don't have that undo feature. So I do love digital art for that reason too, the same as the digital photography.
Yeah, I hadn't even thought about that. That's so true. I wonder if this is just a good way to segue back into, like we talked about, investing in materials and time for our kids. And it makes me think about how we do that for ourselves too, right? Just like what that's opened up for you, Kendel. I mean, the digital camera and the Procreate. For myself, just back to the idea that I talked about in the other episode, that I feel like a lot of my creativity comes it's almost like 2 or 3 things come together at once that I want to express. So for me, that's often music, but it's also often being out in wildlife somewhere. So just thinking about like getting my own provincial park pass last year, which sounds like not a big deal, but I'd always shared one with family. We just kind of got an annual pass and we figured out who needed it when. But I realized for like my own well-being, for my own creativity, for my own just movement, and interest, that I really just wanted to have my own park pass, which doesn't seem like a big deal, but it just felt like such a gift to myself. So I think just moving back into so much of the work that Cyrielle's been doing around like soul care and creativity as well-being, I would love to hear if there are either like investments in materials or just investments in time that come to mind for either of you, that just, you maybe there's something you think about for a long time and you don't do it or you don't buy it, and then you get it or you carve out that time and you think like, what was I doing for so long not giving this gift to myself, right? So
I love your example of like almost like getting the park pass is the gateway, I see, because I can see that your time in nature drives your photography that you share. That would be one of those more traditional, oh, that's artistic, that's creative. And then the writing that you do, that you usually share in tandem with that, and how getting the park pass is the gift of creativity to yourself, because it opens up your mental well-being, being in nature, that then inspires you to take the photos, to share, and then to share your writing, which so many people I think benefit from reading and hearing your thoughts. So I love the thought of those like things that seem adjacent to, and you're like, how does that really relate? For me, like for many years, over the years, people would start to comment on, oh, you love gardening, and oh, you're such a great gardener. And I was like, I do. Is it out of the ordinary? And so it's like that accidental, like, oh, I feel like I do. That is quite creative for me. Can that be considered a hobby or an interest? Or people are recognizing that of me? Like, I don't know, like there's these things that take time. They like unfold, that we recognize, and then it's like it can take years, and then we kind of dive more into that identity, or that feeling of, as the competence maybe comes, we start to feel more like, I do feel like this is something that is an active, important part of my life, or whatever. So it's almost like what reflecting for this episode and preparing got me thinking was how nice it is that we can be so much more outside of the box in what we consider our creative outlets, because they don't just need to be like one of the 20 classes going on in our neighborhood that we can tap into, that are more like traditional fine art or whatever. But for example, one of the things I love doing is like thrifting decor and sometimes upcycling it, and then like creating little seasonal displays in my home. And so and like you mentioned, Erin, it's kind of like a multifaceted and multi-step process. But if you're finding enjoyment out of it and calmness and relaxation and you're just creating something for no reason and it's for your own enjoyment, then it's like just seeing different pockets of our lives as valid and creative that don't fit that particular typical definition has been really, I've been really embracing that lately and coming to almost like this with the gardening thing. It's like accepting that it's okay to think of yourself in a certain way, or it's okay to not be a professional watercolor painter, but to, you know what I mean? Like it's those levels of, you can just enjoy something for the process, and you can just enjoy something for the sake of it, and it's still valid and part of your creative process.
Yes, I love that kind of, and I'm thinking of some of those things as portals into so many other pieces, right? Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I love what you said, Kendel, about just doing it for the pure enjoyment of it. I think that's the key, really, of it helping us with our well-being. And since I've been painting, my mom will often say, "Oh, you should, try and sell your art or do this and that." And I've been reading different things, but when you do monetize, or when you become professional, you have to start. It becomes it's different. Then the outcome is not enjoyment anymore. Is I have a deadline because I have to finish that painting because I have like a commission or something. So, and it can take the joy out of it. And she does talk about it like it's a different way of doing a hobby, but like it's not a hobby anymore, and it just doesn't have that joy element anymore. And I do believe that it actually is true, because I know people who stopped enjoying what they're doing because it became their job, and then it wasn't just the intrinsic motivation, just that it wasn't that creative only. It was linked to that they had money to make, they had to earn money through it, and it became stressful, and so it took that joy away. And also you were saying about like gifting yourself, I think, to us, like making gifts to ourselves. And I love that you got that pass. I think we tend to get things for our children a lot more than we do get for ourselves. So that I'll go to, and I think even when you're homeschooling, even more, because you don't want them to miss out, so you're going to try and find the best things for them, and I think we might forget ourselves sometimes like that way in not getting things for ourselves. But it's so important for us and for our kids to see too that we actually love ourselves enough to actually get something that's just for us, that no one is going to get, because we often tend to share, "Oh, I'll get that," and then our kids are going to use that too, like that kind of thing. And it's okay, like sometimes my daughter will use my things, but like I like to have things that are like I bought just for me, or it's just like really that's my gift to myself, for my well-being, and it brings me joy, and I just want it for me, like, and it's not selfish. It's just like our children sometimes, and we don't force our daughter to share anything. She doesn't want to, right? And it's the same for us. We don't have to share if we don't want to. It's great to share, but like sometimes it's okay to have things that are just for us, just for our own enjoyment.
Yeah. Oh, yes. And I'm thinking too, like from what both of you have said in different ways, how much, so just I'll go backwards. So Cyrielle, what you said about it being okay for us to have things that are just for ourselves. And I'm thinking about how much easier I feel that's been for my husband than it's been for me. Sometimes I'll realize all the little technical tools that he has. And by that, I mean just different programs, different things that he enjoys for his own creativity. And I think about how much more thought I would have had to give that before taking that step to purchase that. But that's kind of on me, right? Like that nobody's stopping me from doing that. But that connects, Kendel, to that idea. And I don't know what your wording was, but kind of putting, like, it's almost like things come together to create something. Maybe other people almost notice it in you before you notice it in yourself. And so something that my husband really has an interesting knack for, and he's been doing it for years, like even before we had the kinds of programs we have now, he was tapping into them, I feel like really early somehow, but just creating, often they're funny, sometimes they're just fun, sometimes they're meaningful, but he will do so many different things with like coworkers' pictures or family members' pictures, and just do really fun things to music and scenes. So much. He's done so much of that. And I remember when my kids were little, like before many other people were, I had never heard of green screen before. And he had all this stuff set up with my kids and green screens and doing all these different things. And that was just a way for him to have fun. And I think a way for him to connect with people. Like he's quite introverted, right? So I think it was a way for him to connect with his friends and family that like, it's like a way of showing them that they're understood by him or they're seen by him, because the music or the backgrounds would just be like so poignant or funny that would relate to their personalities. But yeah, he would just, if he needed a program to create something, I don't mean that he was like carelessly buying stuff, but if it was something that would help him create those for himself or for people, well, that was just a tool that he would get. And so to your point, Cyrielle, yeah, it's important for us, and it's as an extension, it's important for our kids to see us, again, not just like frivolously buying things, but I don't think that's what we're talking about. It's really like buying something that's going to be valuable to our own self-expression. And then by having that vehicle for self-expression, by extension, that's our well-being. And so I think them seeing that is such a good thing, because we can absolutely get lost in this whirlwind of just them and their interests. And I think you made mention of, if you're homeschooling or unschooling, maybe we feel like we're not offering all the resources that school might have automatically. And so it feels all the more, necessary to be giving them all the things.
No. What that's bringing up for me is that it doesn't always need to be a monetary investment either. And we can really phrase things to our children to help them realize that what we're doing is creative. So what I'm thinking is, a lot of people talk about don't just call it a screen, because the screens are so many things. So for example, right now, this is quite a creative conversation. We're creating an episode that others can listen to and have their own thoughts about. And this is free. And so I can then let my kids know about what I'm doing and phrase it in how it enriches me to have conversations like this, and how it is quite creative. We're creating something. So my kids yesterday were like, oh, is this a call? Like, cause we have the network calls, or is this like a recorded podcast? They were trying to differentiate what am I doing today? So just telling them about what it is and why I enjoy it, and how it's a creative outlet for me. And even something as simple as responding. I don't do a lot of inspirational posts. We share our lives and what we're up to, but I don't have a lot of inspirational writing along with them. It's more kind of just, here's a peek into our lives. But when I'm on the network responding to people, it's simple writing, and it's just responding one-to-one to a small group of people, but it's creating something that was not there before that might have an impact on someone else. So letting our kids know what we're up to when we're on our phone. Oh, right now I'm texting with a friend, or I'm responding on Instagram or on a network to other people. It's free and it enriches my life, and we can let them in on what we're up to, and how these things that could look like we're just doing something on our phone are actually one of our creative outlets as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that I love that, because you're kind of narrating, there is this idea of just people being on their phones, but yeah, by being more specific about what it is you're doing and who you're interacting with or creating, it just opens up so many different views around that. And I'm glad you both brought up this sort of monetization of creativity, because I do find that when people see that you're interested in something or you're producing something, it's like, oh, you should sell that. You should do this. You should do that. And I can think about, even as a kid, a family friend we had who did a lot of, I guess, fine carpentry and woodworking. And I remember being at like a barbecue or something and people saying to him, oh, you should be selling that stuff. What, why don't you start a business? And him just saying, well, for me, that wouldn't be, it would take some of the enjoyment out and it would add pressure. And so it's not that there's one way or another to think about it. For some people, it does make sense to monetize what they're, or to partially monetize what they're doing. But I think this this sort of assumption that if you have a gift or you have an interest, that you need to make it into either a full career or even a side gig or whatever, it's an interesting one. And I think, I've definitely seen it even kind of be projected on kids. Oh, they're going to be a musician, or they're going to be this, or they're going to be that, when really it's one part of who they are. And the focus that everything has to be about monetization is just like an interesting one. That's probably a whole other conversation, but I'm just glad you both brought it up, because I think it's something that's people commonly run into. So
yeah, and I think when people say that, there's so much around, like, it's not just selling, there's so much around creating, having a business, like it's so much. And you end up not doing what you enjoy, actually, because there's so much marketing and so much that actually the part that you enjoy doing, like creating, it gets so small that then, and people, obviously, they don't mean anything bad when they say that. Actually, it's a compliment. They're like, oh, it's so good you could sell it, but it's just not, it's not easy to sell whatever you're doing. If it was easy, I think it would be more enjoyable, but there's so much to do to actually be able to sell, to get to that part, that I think that's what takes the enjoyment out, is the fact that you have to do maybe 70% of non-creation and then 30%, I'm making things up, but you know what I mean? Like, it takes that joy out of it. I think that part of running a business and doing all of this, that's not, linked to what you wanted to do in the first place.
Yeah.
I was a photographer for many years, and I definitely agree with what you're saying. When I would do weddings, I would feel like more of like a people coordinator, and that I would write up contracts, and I would, so many meetings, and then the editing phase, and it was more, and the advertising, like you're talking about. And then I also had an Etsy shop for many years doing digital design, and I had one product in particular that did really, really well, so I started focusing on it. But it definitely, it's like the joy has been taken out of it, because this is the, 40th one that I've done this year. And anyway, and it was much more, the finance, all the business management, like you're saying, that goes into it can kill the creative aspects. And then I definitely saw, my love for photography come back when it was no longer my job. So then when my kids were young, I could pick up the camera again in a more creative way. So it's like that thing where if you're doing it a lot, then you need the break from it, and it's no longer part of your day-to-day life in a creative way. So finding that balance for people that do creative sales, and is quite a balance. And
and I think also, like, when you decide like to do the business, it's different, right? And like it's what brings you joy, and then that business, that's a difference, right? Like, I think there's that too. Like, business can be enjoyable. Like, when I'm creating, it's the same. Like, it's a business, but purposefully, I haven't created something that I have to sell my own art. I'm making art through it, or like I'm doing, right? You see what I mean? Like, so like. I think having a business can bring joy as well, but you have to be careful not to kill the joy, the reason why you're doing it in the first place, right? Like, not to remove that joy that was there when you wanted to create it.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, so many little nuances, right? To think about. I wonder, just in like winding down, it might not be a bad thought to revisit. So in the last episode, I think it was you, Cyrielle. We brought up the idea of, so I'm thinking of time now, kind of carving out that time for ourselves. And I just wonder about just talking about that from a practical perspective before we sign off today. And I think we were talking about it with like communicating with our spouses or potentially other caregivers or grandparents or even our children themselves, as far as how do we communicate that need to our family, and I think just create the expectation that we will be taking some time creatively for ourselves. And Kendel, you kind of alluded to it, that this is kind of a creative endeavor today, and you had that conversation with your kids this morning. So there's some degree of communication about that ahead of time, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think for me, like we were talking about, the narrating is crucial. Letting them in on the whys of why we're doing things, so it can, just like they would let us know why they're enjoying their creative practices. Some of my things, like for instance gardening, it's going to be gearing up right now, and it's more seasonal. So even narrating, like, I know it seems like I'm spending a lot of time doing this right now, here's why. And also I have over the years invited them to be part of it. So to whatever degree they're interested in it, they often have their own plant pots, or my son's in charge of the herb garden area, or they enjoy the physicality of bringing the bags of soil or whatever it is. So bringing them into our creative practices. And if we're in a season of where they're more frequent, like narrating, like, oh, like, this is more, the spring season is more heavy on something I'm interested in doing. Like I've already been talking to them about how we're entering garden center season, where our days really shift into going to get what we need so that it's all in the ground on time. And so they're just aware of it, and they kind of have a little bit of heads up early on, and then they know it's not going to last forever, and they can come and go and engage in it however they want. So that's part of how, And I have in the past been part of a choir when the kids were little. So that's that more element of the caregiver, like having with my husband, like conversations about how that will all go when there's longer days, when I would be doing like a special presentation, and there would be a morning concert and an evening concert, like all those conversations around that someone else is on board with supporting those pockets of times that you need to dedicate to the creativity. We're definitely part of that when my creative things were more outside the home.
Yeah. And what, I'm thinking something like the choir, Kendel, when I've had things like that, like I'm even thinking about taking the time to record the podcast or whatever, there's the period of time you're going to be doing it. And then there is the, is there prep ahead of time? Not even just like practical prep, but like, what do you need as a person? If you have, let's say, the afternoon choir event and then an evening choir event, it's holiday season, let's pretend, whatever, what do you need to rest in between that, or prep? Do you need space to prepare things or whatever? So yeah, just communicating with family about the event itself, but also, what may be required as far as lead up or coming back down off of things again. Yeah.
Yeah, I think communicating our needs is key, just communication in general. Like, I think not telling our kids things can make them feel like disconnected. And I think, and not understanding as well why we want to be away from them, because, and above all when they're little, I think when they're little is trickier because they're very close to us, and depending, of the neurodivergence as well, they might need more co-regulation. And I know that was true for my daughter. She needs a lot, but at the same time, if I wasn't communicating what I needed, or expressing that I also need time, and I think everyone as well, like we often have these conversations of needing time. Everybody needs time to be by themselves, right? Like, so my husband needs, time to himself. We need time together as a couple. We need, like all these elements of everybody needs time. We need time to be together, as a family, to connect together with, like, I spend lots of time with her. Obviously, homeschooling, you spend time and you connect and you spend lots of time together with them. But just that notion of spending time together by yourself, and doing something you enjoy is really important. And I think it's just communicating, and it's hard at first for them to, I think, grasp that concept of you not wanting to be with them. And it's not even, I think it's also, it can be a pull, like, of wanting to be with them and and that's why we chose that life, right? That being able to spend as much time with them as we can, instead of them being at school and not seeing them, all day long. But it's just that pull of, I want to spend time with them, but I also want to spend time by myself. So it's just like trying to communicate to them, like, I love spending time with you, and that's why we're unschooling, right? But I also love having some time to myself, to have like that quiet, that, space where I can just do something for my own joy, and not to think about anything else that I have to take care of, for example. And yeah, so I think communicating that, and age appropriate, but like slowly and surely, and building it up. Like, you can start with 10 minutes if it's too hard for them, and then, increase it. And then obviously communicating with your partner. And I think that's also key, because then they can bridge the gap and not be with the child, when you do need to have that time. And yeah, so like before it gets to an overwhelm or a burnout because you don't take that time. I think it's just ongoing communication. And it might be easier in certain seasons, might be harder, it fluctuates. And I think, yeah, just communicating, I think, is so important.
Well, I like the duality of that too, of when we're having those conversations with our kids, that we can say, like, I know I have said this before, either something that whether it was maybe needing to go to work or needing to do something to help somebody, or just taking time for myself. Sometimes sometimes we would like to be both places at the same time, right? And just being able to just have this as normal conversation, right? So yeah, I now that I'm back home, I kind of don't feel like going back out, but I've told them I'll be there. So just so that they know that it's not, I think that just really models the complexity of life, not in a scary way, but just, we often have, you might want to go to the choir night, and also you'd like to have the movie night at home. And so sometimes we're just working through making those decisions. But Cyrielle, I like that you brought up sort of the kind of earlier years or times when kids might need us to regulate a little bit more, because I do think, for myself at least, I have had seasons that, I haven't been able to do my own thing as much. And sometimes that's just, I think for myself at least, I guess I'll speak for myself, I want to acknowledge that it's not everybody is in a situation where they can easily or quickly take time for themselves. But I feel like if you're in a season where that's not happening or happening easily, it can be helpful just to acknowledge that, like this, my child's really little, or you might have a baby, or a child just in a really busy or difficult season. You do have that time where you need to be with them, sometimes maybe almost constantly, but just acknowledging that, you're putting your own needs on the back burner, but like at least naming that can be really useful, I think.
And I definitely had those seasons, and I found that it could feel very lacking. It could feel like I could be down about it, but I shifted into seeing things I was already doing as valid, the expanse of the creativity, and like really validate that things that maybe were a little like, decorating for the holidays or creating an environment in my home, things I could do in tandem with being with my children and not leaving the home, as valid and creative outlets for me, even if they weren't some ticking a box somewhere of a valid creative practice you could be part of more. So like a choir would be, seen by more people as a thing that you're doing. And just really validating it for myself and not worrying about anyone else being like, oh, you don't have any hobbies and interests outside of the home. That seems a little, limiting, but really just leaning into like, I love gardening. I can do that with my kids. I can I can watercolor paint in my free time, things you can do at home, so that your kids have what they need as well.
Yeah.
It's a good way of shifting the perspective too.
Yeah. And I think sometimes it's even, I have found finding your own, it might be creativity. Sometimes it's just kind of a restful state of mind in their actual activities. Maybe there are times that you can join them in coloring, or what comes to mind for me often is when one of my kids was a toddler, well, I'm going to say maybe 3 or 4, and he was just so into moving these trucks over tracks, and he just really needed me to be there with him. But it could actually be kind of meditative, right? Like in that moment, there were other times where more was required of me as far as playing a role. But with this particular child in the situation, it wasn't necessarily that. So there are times that you can find to rest, or sometimes I think we can set ourselves up in an us or them mentality. So it's like, oh, I've spent so much time with them and now I need my time. But, if they're building a big train track or they're creating a world, having that moment where you think, okay, maybe I could, like, what if I really leaned into this and contributed my creativity to building this world, or, creating this train track or whatever. It's like, it can be separate, but it doesn't always have to be. So just staying kind of curious about like what's our mindset around things in that particular stage. But anything else before we say goodbye? Anything else that pops up for either of you?
I think overall, I was just like trying to formulate my ideas, and I was listening to the past episode about creativity. And Erin, you mentioned that in school you felt quite like almost like you didn't even want to tap into your creativity. And maybe it's like what we touched on earlier, if you knew it was going to be very structured, like when you get to do art time, it kind of dictated to you and you don't have much free creativity within it. Or maybe it was you're just getting into it and the bell rings, or things of that nature. So I think just in reflecting on this, I was just really having gratitude for the lifestyle we've chosen to have, where we have this time for creativity to emerge naturally. I think that's been huge for my kids, is that it's coming from within them and they have a lot of autonomy of choice over then leaving it, when to do it, how long to do it. And that it's like over time that autonomy is a crucial part of the creativity in order for it to be meaningful and fulfilling for the individual. So I think we touched a lot on that throughout what we've been saying, but just if it's not emerging from them and it's just, we're doing this, here's how to do it step by step, and this is when we're going to stop, and this is what your results should look like. They're never getting, and if they don't have that time and space to do it, it's never getting to that level of fulfillment. And so I just have been reflecting on how grateful I am that that is a big perk of having them at home, and of seeing all the different ways that they're being creative as valid, and not just if it's being a certificate from a dance studio or you know what I mean? Like, it's just, it's taken me years to get to that point of being like, what they're doing, even though it's not getting a trophy or a certificate or a grade, is actually so much more, because it's fulfilling who they are, it's expressing who they are, and maybe they're a lot more mentally healthy in the end, even though it's not up on a wall in a gallery, for example. I'm looking right now, I'm in my bedroom, I have about 10 of their art pieces. It's in my gallery, you know what I mean? Like, and they're proud of it and they enjoyed doing it, and it was coming from within. So anyway, and I think there's probably ways to create time and space for that for people who do have more strict schedules. And there's still time in the evenings and weekends for people to get to that place, but I'm just really grateful that it's almost this byproduct that I've been able to notice, as opposed to like trying to make happen. I'm like, oh, like over the years, I'm like, I'm noticing the more hands-off I am, because I'm quite I have teacher training. I'm like, let's do this beautiful art project and this is what it's supposed to look like. But I've recognized when I can get out of that mode and let things unfold naturally and give them the time they need and not have expectations of outcome or expectations of how this is your identity, you have to keep doing this. When I can, like, it's just a byproduct of the lifestyle to let them have this outlet that I think is so helpful for all of us.
Yeah. And it makes me think about something we didn't really touch on too, but I'll just quickly pop in here, is the idea of like outcome and how we don't necessarily, like, I think often a finished, completed project is something that's really respected. And sometimes our kids will be done with things when they're done with them, right? It's something might be a stepping stone to something else. And that can be true for us as well. We don't always have to, well, first of all, we don't always have to have a goal. We can just start messing with stuff and creating. But even if we did have a goal set and we don't meet that, well, it's like we have an idea of some outer authority telling us, oh, you didn't finish knitting that scarf, or you didn't finish writing that article, but nobody else. It's hard to shut ourselves, I think, of that external assumption. But if we're finished with something, then it served its purpose for us. And if it's important for us to come back to it, then we will find a way to do that. But I think that's what came to mind for me, Kendel, too, around, like, thank you so much for sharing that. And the outcome piece, I just realized we hadn't really talked about, but it all feels related. And you mentioned certificates, and like sometimes certificates are fun. Like one of my guys did his goal, he went to Home Depot to the monthly projects, and his goal was to get the 100 project pin. So he got, the 25 project and the 50 and the 75 and the 100. And so that was fun for him. It was kind of a goal that he met, and it was very exciting. But at the same time, when we, back to the idea of really sourcing out good materials and good resources for people, the Home Depot piece definitely served a purpose. But finding a carpenter that he could mentor with every week and work in a real wood shop with beautiful tools and so much inspiration around him. It wasn't a fancy shop. It was a little shop, but a really nice one. And you could see, different projects that were in various stages of completion. So you could see the carpenter's creative process around you, and you were using real tools. And he did do things to completion, like they did work on projects to completion. But if he had decided to change course and thought, oh, I'm actually not going to finish building that, I'm going to do something different instead, like it would have been fine, because he was still participating in that process. And the other thing that comes to mind for me from that is the relationship, that mentorship relationship that he developed. So there's all these little things that we have the opportunity to tap into, which would have been so different. I'm thinking of my own woodshop experience in like grade 7 and 8 with like a teacher and 30 kids. These are the 3 projects you do this semester. It's so different that it's almost hard to even articulate. Like it's so different. But yeah. Cyrielle, anything or we sign up?
Yeah. I love what you both shared, and it made me think of how, in school you have, I haven't been a teacher, and I taught art a little bit to elementary level, but you do have an outcome because you have to follow like the curriculum, whatever, and you have to do this and it has to look the certain way, and then you get graded on it. And just to think of getting graded on a creative piece seems like great. Like, how can we think it's okay to grade like something that someone has created? It's so subjective. Art is so subjective anyways, but like just the thought of grading art and creativity is just, for me it's crazy. And also how any creative subject gets kind of pushed away as you go through the year. I don't know how it is in Canada, but having been schooled in France, you probably have a lot of that. I think in elementary, there's more hours. And then in middle school, I think that's called middle school, there's probably an hour a week or something. And then music as well. And then high school, we had nothing. Like if you wanted to do these things, it was an optional, so an extra lesson, but there was none, no art, no music, no, nothing like that. So it's just like, it goes to show that it's not really considered as important. And as Kendel said, like, I'm really grateful that we can offer that, just be able to, if we want to, dive as much as we want in that creative process without thinking, oh, you can't. It's not a good subject. It's not a core subject like math, science, and English, and that's where the focus is, when, the focus should be where the child wants to go, and where its creativity goes. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. I think Canada, when I was in school, elementary and even into high school, I remember a lot of creative outlet at that point. I remember authors' visits, and I remember us creating storybooks, but we had a lot of say in what those were. And I think, like many parts of the world, as things became more standardized, probably, I'm thinking like the late 90s, things became more standardized. And I think it's probably similar now, Cyrielle, where it's much more boxed into the core subjects, and those other things are there, but they are seen more as extras, I think, now. And I think that's true of lots of places from what I hear, like from what I understand. Yeah. Well, thank you so much. This has really, really been good. I've enjoyed it very much. So thank you to both of you, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Yeah, thanks for having me as part of the conversation. It was really enjoyable.
Yeah, thank you. I really enjoyed it too.
And this ends our conversation today. We hope you found it interesting and maybe helpful. If you'd like to connect further or see additional content, Haley can be found on the web and on Instagram at Taking a Kinder Path. I, Erin, can be found at Everlearning, and Ashley can be found on Instagram at Ashley as Mama and Storytime Shelves. We'd be very grateful if you'd share this conversation with anyone you think might appreciate it. Thank you for your time today.